The best lunch most Americans ever had was not served in a restaurant. It came across a Formica counter wedged between the tire department and the fitting rooms, plated by a cook who never told you her name and never needed to. Every Sears worth the name had one of those counters: spinning stools, paper napkins, and food that hit the counter before you finished sitting down. What sat at number 14 was the reason some shoppers never made it past the counter to buy anything at all. And the plate at number 8 brought people to Sears who had no intention of shopping. Those counters fed a generation of Americans who walked in for a washing machine and stayed for a bowl of soup. Here are 25 forgotten Sears lunch counter specials that vanished forever. Number 25. Grilled cheese sandwich. 2 slices of American cheese between white bread, buttered on the outside and pressed flat on a hot griddle until the bread turned dark gold and the cheese pulled in long strings when you bit through it. At Sears, the grilled cheese was the thing children pointed at before they could read the menu, and the thing their mothers ordered for themselves when they did not feel like deciding. The cook pressed it with a spatula until the edges sealed and the whole sandwich went thin and crispy. No bacon, no tomato, no fancy additions, just bread, butter, and cheese, done right on a griddle that had been seasoned by thousands of sandwiches before it. You could smell it 3 aisles away, and that smell is the reason half the people reading this can close their eyes and be right back on that stool. Number 24. Cream of tomato soup. A smooth, brick-red soup made from stewed tomatoes, a splash of cream, and a pinch of sugar to cut the acid, served in a heavy ceramic bowl with a sleeve of saltine crackers on the saucer. The Sears lunch counter version came out of a big kettle that had been simmering all morning, and it tasted exactly the same every single time you ordered it. That was the whole appeal. You did not go to Sears for a chef's interpretation of tomato soup. You went because you knew what you were getting before the spoon hit the bowl. People crumbled their crackers into it and stirred until the soup turned thick and the crackers went soft. Children dipped grilled cheese corners into it. Adults ate it with black coffee and called that lunch. It never won a cooking prize, but it did something no prize-winning soup has managed. It made a department store feel like somebody's kitchen. Before I go further, for those of you who want recipes like these gathered in one place, I put together the Vintage Recipe Guide. You will find it on my website, vintagelifestyleusa.com. That is the only time I will mention it. If you want it, it is right there. Now, back to the list. Number 23. Welsh Rarebit. A thick cheese sauce made from sharp cheddar melted with a splash of beer, a spoonful of dry mustard, and a dash of Worcestershire, poured bubbling hot over a slice of toast and served on a warm plate. At the Sears counter, Welsh Rarebit sat in a strange category between a sandwich and a soup. It was open-faced, too wet to pick up, and too thick to sip. You ate it with a knife and fork, and the cheese was sharp enough to bite back. The mustard gave it heat, the beer gave it depth, and the toast underneath soaked up everything the cheese could not hold, turning soft and golden and rich in a way that plain bread and a slice of cheddar never could. It was the lunch that sounded fancy and cost almost nothing, and the people who ordered it once ordered it every time after that. Number 22. Tuna salad sandwich. Canned tuna, mayonnaise, a little chopped celery, salt and pepper, mixed fresh every morning and spread thick on soft bread cut diagonal with a pickle spear leaning against the plate. The Sears version had no lemon, no dill, no capers, nothing that would confuse anybody about what they were eating. It was the most popular cold sandwich at most locations for years, ordered by women who had been shopping all morning and needed something fast that would not slow them down for the afternoon. The cook behind the counter never measured the mayonnaise. She added it by feel, the way her mother had, and when somebody asked for the recipe, she just shrugged because there was nothing to write down. Number 21. Beef stew plate. Chunks of beef, potatoes cut into quarters, carrots sliced thick, onion, and a dark brown gravy that had been simmering since morning, served in a shallow bowl with a roll on the side. At Sears, the beef stew was a cold weather order. People came in from the parking lot with their coats still buttoned and pointed at the board without looking at anything else. The meat was tender enough to cut with a spoon. The potatoes had soaked up enough gravy to taste like the whole pot. and the roll was there for one reason only, which was to soak up whatever was left at the bottom of the bowl when the spoon could not reach it anymore. Nobody ever sent it back. Nobody ever left any in the bowl either. The Sears lunch counter was never supposed to be a destination. It was built as a convenience, a way to keep shoppers inside the store longer, feed them something hot and cheap, and they would spend another hour browsing the catalog. But something happened that nobody in corporate planned for. The lunch counter became the reason people came. Women met their friends there every Thursday. Retired men sat at the same stool every morning with a cup of coffee and the newspaper. Mothers brought their children after school shopping in September and turned it into a tradition that lasted years. The food was simple, the prices were low, and the counter, with its spinning stools and short-order cooks who remembered your name, became as much a part of the American retail landscape as the Sears catalog itself. Number 20. Chicken croquettes. Leftover roast chicken chopped fine, mixed with a thick white sauce, shaped into small logs, rolled in breadcrumbs, and fried until the outside turned golden and crunchy. At Sears, the croquettes came two to a plate with a side of creamed peas and a dinner roll. They were the cook's way of making sure nothing went to waste. Yesterday's chicken became today's lunch special, and nobody complained because the breadcrumb crust hid everything and the white sauce held it all together. Chicken croquettes were a fixture of American lunch counters, cafeterias, and church suppers for decades. They required skill to make properly because the filling had to be cold enough to hold its shape during frying. A sloppy croquette fell apart in the oil and ended up as scrambled chicken. A good one cracked open clean with a fork and steamed from the center. Number 19. Chili con carne. A heavy bowl of ground beef simmered with kidney beans, tomatoes, onion, and enough chili powder to turn the whole pot dark red, served with a handful of oyster crackers and a glass of water nobody asked for. At Sears, the chili was thick, not soupy, not runny, not the kind you could drink from a mug. The spoon stood up in the center of the bowl and stayed there. The beef had broken down into the sauce until you could not tell where the meat ended and the tomato began. On cold days in November and December, the chili outsold everything else on the board because it was hot and filling, and it warmed you from the stomach outward in a way that a sandwich simply could not. Men ate it fast, women ate it slow, children pushed the beans to one side and ate around them. And when the bowl was empty, the crackers were gone, and the water glass was dry, you went back into the store feeling like you had eaten a meal that cost 3 times what you paid. Number 18. Monte Cristo sandwich. Turkey, ham, and Swiss cheese layered between bread, dipped in egg batter, and griddled until the outside turned golden and the cheese melted through the middle. At Sears, the Monte Cristo came dusted with powdered sugar and a small dish of raspberry jam on the side, sweet and savory on the same plate, which confused some people and delighted everyone else. The egg batter turned the bread into something like French toast, and biting through that crisp golden shell into warm melted cheese and deli meat was a combination that did not exist anywhere else on the menu. It was the one sandwich at the lunch counter that people talked about after they left the store. Most lunch counter food was forgettable by design, good enough to eat, easy enough to forget. The Monte Cristo refused to be forgotten. You tasted the powdered sugar and the jam for the rest of the afternoon. Number 17. Egg salad sandwich. Hard-boiled eggs, mayonnaise, a pinch of salt, a little mustard, and the back of a fork. Nothing else went into the bowl. At Sears, the egg salad was made every morning and kept cold in a steel container behind the counter. It went on soft bread with the crusts on, and it came with chips and a pickle. Nothing about it was remarkable. Nothing about it needed to be. It was the cheapest sandwich on the menu, and for people watching every dollar, that mattered more than flavor. But the thing about egg salad is that it carries memory. One bite and you are 10 years old again, sitting at a counter that does not exist anymore, swinging your legs because your feet did not reach the floor. Number 16. Beef Manhattan. An open-faced sandwich made from thin slices of roast beef layered over a piece of white bread, the whole thing buried under a ladle of brown gravy and served with a scoop of mashed potatoes on the side. At the Sears counter, the beef Manhattan was the plate that looked like Sunday dinner on a weekday. The gravy soaked through the bread until it fell apart under your fork, and the roast beef was sliced thin enough that it curled at the edges where the heat caught it. Nobody ate this with their hands. You could not. Everything on the plate was wet, soft, and heavy, and the mashed potatoes acted as a dam holding back the gravy from running off the edge. It was the kind of lunch that slowed you down whether you wanted it to or not, and the people who ordered it usually sat at the counter a little longer than everyone else. Number 15. Patty Melt. A hamburger patty on rye bread with grilled onions and melted Swiss cheese, pressed flat on the griddle until the bread turned dark and crispy. The patty melt was not a hamburger and it was not a grilled cheese. It sat somewhere in between, and that in between was its genius. At Sears, the flat griddle behind the counter was the perfect tool for making one. The cook pressed the sandwich down with a spatula until the cheese ran through the onions and the bread absorbed just enough grease from the patty to turn golden. It came out flat, crisp, and dripping. You ate it fast because it did not taste the same once it cooled. The patty melt survived longer than most lunch counter items. You can still find one in some diners today, but the Sears version, made on that particular griddle by a cook who pressed it with exactly the right amount of force, has not existed in decades. The rye bread was the key. It held up under pressure better than white bread, and the slight sourness of the rye played against the sweet onions and the sharp cheese in a way that a regular bun never could. People who ordered it once ordered it again. People who ordered it twice never switched to anything else. The patty melt was the lunch counter's quiet masterpiece, the one dish that used every advantage of that flat commercial griddle and turned two ordinary ingredients into something that a home kitchen could imitate but never quite equal. The weight of the spatula, the heat of the surface, the timing that only comes from making the same sandwich hundreds of times. That was what made the Sears patty melt what it was, and that is exactly what disappeared when the griddle went cold. What made the Sears lunch counter different from a diner was that you did not go there to eat. You went there to shop, and eating happened along the way. That distinction mattered. A diner was a destination. The Sears counter was an interruption, a pause in the middle of something else. And because of that, the food had to be fast, cheap, and good enough that you did not resent the stop. It could not be too ambitious. It could not take too long, and it could not cost more than whatever you had left over after buying shoes for the children. Those constraints produced a particular kind of cooking: simple ingredients, practiced hands, and no room for pretension. Number 14. Coconut cream pie. A flaky crust filled with thick vanilla custard folded through with sweetened shredded coconut, topped with whipped cream and a sprinkle of toasted coconut on top. At Sears, the pie sat in a glass display case at the front of the counter, and it stopped people before they even sat down. That case was the silent salesman of the entire operation. You came in for a sandwich and left having eaten dessert first. The coconut cream pie was cut into generous slices and served on a small plate with a fork. The custard was dense enough to hold its shape, but soft enough to dissolve the moment it hit your tongue. Some Sears locations sold more pie than sandwiches on certain days because the display case did what no menu board could. It showed you exactly what you wanted before you knew you wanted it. Number 13. Cottage cheese and fruit plate. A scoop of cold cottage cheese sitting in the center of a plate surrounded by canned peach halves, a few pineapple rings, and a small mound of iceberg lettuce with a cherry on top. At Sears, this was the diet plate. It showed up on the menu under a different name at every location, but the idea was always the same. Women ordered it when they wanted to eat lunch without feeling like they had eaten lunch. The cottage cheese was cold and bland, and the fruit was sweet and soft, and the lettuce was there for decoration more than flavor. Nobody ever craved it. But it cost less than anything else on the board. It came out of the kitchen in under a minute, and it let you sit at the counter with a cup of coffee for as long as you wanted without spending more than pocket change. The cottage cheese plate was not a meal anyone remembered fondly. It was a meal that let you stay. Number 12. Chicken pot pie. A single-serving pot pie with a golden pastry crust on top, filled with chunks of chicken, peas, diced carrots, and a thick cream sauce that bubbled up through the cracks when you broke the crust open. At the Sears counter, the pot pie came out of the oven in its own little tin dish, and you had to wait for it. That was part of the experience. The waitress set it down and told you it was hot, and you already knew because the steam was curling off the crust before she finished the sentence. The inside was dense and white and creamy, and the vegetables were soft enough that they disappeared into the sauce with every bite. The crust was flaky on top and soggy on the bottom where it had been sitting in the filling, and that soggy bottom was the part nobody admitted they liked best. Number 11. Corn chowder. A thick, pale yellow soup made with creamed corn, diced potatoes, onion, butter, and milk, simmered until the potatoes softened and the whole pot turned rich and heavy. At Sears, the corn chowder showed up on the menu in autumn and stayed through March. It came in the same heavy bowl as every other soup, and you could smell the butter and corn from halfway across the floor. It was not glamorous. It was not trying to be. But on a cold afternoon, when you had been walking through the store for 2 hours and your feet hurt, sitting down to a bowl of corn chowder and a few crackers felt like someone had handed you a blanket. The corn chowder never made it onto any best of list. It never won an award. It just sat on the stove and waited for someone who needed it, and it was always there when they did. Number 10. Salisbury steak. A seasoned ground beef patty formed into an oval, cooked in a hot skillet and smothered in brown mushroom gravy. At Sears, the Salisbury steak came on a warm plate with mashed potatoes on one side and green beans on the other. It was the blue plate special, the thing the counter put out when they wanted to feed a crowd quickly at a fair price. The gravy was rich, salty, and made from real drippings. Nobody pretended Salisbury steak was fine dining, but for someone who needed a hot lunch in under 20 minutes without spending much, it did the job better than anything else on the board. Salisbury steak was honest food, and the Sears counter was an honest place to eat it. The gravy pooled around the mashed potatoes, the green beans sat in their own little section, and the whole plate looked like something out of a school cafeteria, except it tasted better than any cafeteria ever managed. The women who worked behind those lunch counters never got the credit they deserved. They memorized regulars by name. They knew who took cream in their coffee and who took it black. They knew which children could not eat certain foods and which husband was going to send back the soup no matter what was in it. They worked on their feet for 8 hours, wiped the same counter 100 times a day, and went home smelling like onion grease and coffee. Most of them earned just above minimum wage. None of them were famous. And when the counters closed, they did not get farewell pieces in the newspaper. They got a last paycheck and a walk through an empty store. Number 9. Salmon croquettes. Canned salmon mixed with crushed saltines, egg, onion, and a squeeze of lemon, shaped into thick patties and fried until the crust turned crisp and brown. At the Sears counter, they came 2 to a plate with tartar sauce, a scoop of coleslaw, and a dinner roll. The outside crackled when you cut through it, and the inside was soft and flaky with little flecks of pink and the occasional tiny bone that you just ate without thinking about it. Croquettes were a way to turn a cheap can of fish into something that felt like a real meal, and the women who made them behind the counter got the ratio of cracker to salmon right every single time without writing anything down. Number 8. Meatloaf plate. Ground beef mixed with breadcrumbs, egg, onion, salt, pepper, and a thick stripe of ketchup across the top, baked in a loaf pan until it was firm enough to slice but soft enough to fall apart on the plate. At Sears, the meatloaf came in thick slices with mashed potatoes and gravy, and a vegetable on the side, usually green beans or corn. It was a dinner plate disguised as a lunch special. Nobody ordered meatloaf at a lunch counter because they wanted something exciting. They ordered it because it tasted the way their mother's kitchen smelled on a Tuesday night. Comfort, not novelty. Familiarity, not surprise. The cook who made it every morning used the same recipe for years: ground beef, plain breadcrumbs, 1 egg, diced onion, salt, and enough ketchup to glaze the top. She did not experiment. She did not try new things. She made the same loaf, sliced it the same way, and put it on the same heavy plate. And for the regulars who sat at that counter several times a week, that consistency was everything. You did not want the meatloaf to be different. You wanted it to be exactly what it was last Thursday. When Sears closed its lunch counters, the meatloaf went back to private kitchens, where it still exists, but never quite tastes the same as it did on a heavy plate at a counter where someone else did the cooking and the cleaning up. The Sears meatloaf was not about the recipe. It was about the ritual, walking in, sitting down, and knowing exactly what was coming. That kind of certainty does not exist at a drive-through window, and it never will. Number 7. Rice pudding. Cold, creamy, and dusted with cinnamon, served in a small glass dish behind the dessert case. At Sears, the rice pudding sat between the pies and the gelatin squares, and it was the thing grandmothers pointed at when they decided the afternoon deserved something sweet. The rice was soft from sitting in custard overnight. The raisins were plump and tender and had soaked up enough sweetness that they burst in your mouth. Nobody ordered rice pudding in a hurry. You ate it one small spoonful at a time, and the cold cream coated your tongue in a way that made you slow down whether you meant to or not. When the dish was empty, you sat there a moment longer than necessary, because standing up meant walking back into the fluorescent aisles and the parking lot and whatever the rest of the day had planned for you. Rice pudding was 5 more minutes of stillness, and at a lunch counter in the middle of a department store, 5 minutes of stillness was worth more than dessert. Number 6. Chef salad. Iceberg lettuce, sliced turkey, ham, hard-boiled egg, tomato, cucumber, and a handful of shredded cheddar, served in a large bowl with a packet of Thousand Island dressing on the side. The chef salad was the Sears lunch counter's concession to people who did not want fried food, and it sold better than anyone expected. It was a full meal in a bowl. The deli meats were sliced that morning, the eggs were boiled fresh, and the lettuce was cold and crisp. Nobody called it health food, but for the women who came back to that counter regularly, having one lighter option on the board made all the difference. The chef salad outlasted almost everything else on the Sears menu, and the reason was simple. It required no cooking, no oven, no griddle. Just a cutting board, a bowl, and someone who showed up early enough to slice the turkey and boil the eggs. When the kitchen shut down, the chef salad was the last thing to go. When Sears started closing its lunch counters, nobody protested. There were no petitions, no newspaper campaigns, no neighborhood rallies. They were just lunch counters. The food was simple. The setting was a department store, and the country was moving toward food courts and drive-thrus that promised speed above all else. But what disappeared with those counters was something no food court has ever replaced. A place where you sat next to a stranger, ate the same meal off the same menu, and shared a counter for 20 minutes without needing to explain who you were or why you were there. The Sears lunch counter was not a restaurant. It was a public table, and this country has not built another one since. Number 5. Ham and bean soup. A thick, smoky soup made from a leftover ham bone, simmered all morning with navy beans, onion, celery, and just enough black pepper to give it warmth, served in a deep bowl with a piece of cornbread or a few crackers on the side. At the Sears counter, ham and bean soup was the winter lunch. It showed up on the specials board in October and stayed there until March, and the people who ordered it were not browsing. They had come in from the cold, they were hungry, and they wanted something that would fill them up and warm them through before they walked back outside. The beans were soft and starchy and had absorbed so much of the ham flavor that they tasted like meat. The broth was cloudy and thick and clung to the spoon, and somewhere in every bowl, there was a small piece of ham that had fallen off the bone, and finding it felt like finding something you had not paid for. Number 4. Hot turkey sandwich. Sliced turkey breast laid over bread, open-faced, covered in light turkey gravy, with mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce on the side. This was Thanksgiving on a plate, available any day of the week for less than the cost of a small roast at the grocery store. At Sears, the hot turkey sandwich was the autumn special, but it never really left the menu because people kept ordering it in June. The gravy was lighter than the brown kind that came with the roast beef, and the cranberry sauce was the jellied kind from a can, sliced into a clean round disc and placed on the plate like a garnish nobody questioned. The combination of warm turkey, soft bread soaked through with gravy, and cold cranberry jelly on the side was the most nostalgic plate on the entire menu. People ate it slowly and thought about home. Number 3. Grilled Reuben. Corned beef, sauerkraut, Swiss cheese, and Thousand Island dressing pressed between 2 slices of dark rye bread and grilled on the flat top until the cheese melted and the bread turned crisp and dark on both sides. At the Sears lunch counter, the Reuben was the sandwich that took the longest to make and the fastest to disappear. The corned beef was sliced thin and piled thick, and the sauerkraut was warm and tangy and cut through the richness of the cheese in a way that kept you reaching for the next bite before you had finished swallowing the last one. The rye bread held everything together, barely, and the dressing leaked out the sides onto the plate where people dragged their last few bites through it. It was messy, it was loud to eat, and nobody who ordered one ever looked dignified doing it. But dignified was not the point. The Reuben was the lunch counter at its best, a sandwich too good to eat politely. Number 2. Pineapple upside-down cake. A cast-iron skillet lined with melted butter and brown sugar, topped with canned pineapple rings and maraschino cherries, then covered with a simple yellow cake batter and baked until the top was firm and the bottom had caramelized into a sticky, dark glaze. At Sears, the pineapple upside-down cake sat in the dessert case already sliced, each piece flipped onto a small plate so the pineapple rings faced up, glistening under the counter lights. It was the showpiece of the dessert case. Every ring was perfectly centered. Every cherry sat in the middle of its ring like it had been placed there by someone who cared. The cake itself was moist from the butter and sugar that had soaked up through the bottom during baking, and the pineapple had gone soft and sweet from the heat. People who had no intention of ordering dessert changed their minds when they saw it sitting in that case. Number 1. Chicken noodle soup. The simplest thing on the menu, and the one that mattered most. At Sears, the chicken noodle soup was made every morning from a whole chicken, egg noodles, carrots, celery, onion, salt, and water. Nothing else. It simmered for hours before the first customer sat down, and by lunchtime the broth had turned golden and the noodles had gone soft enough to dissolve on your tongue. They served it in a heavy bowl with a spoon and 2 packets of saltine crackers. It was the meal you ordered when you were tired, when you were cold, when you did not feel well, when you did not feel like deciding. It asked nothing of you. Chicken noodle soup is not gone. You can find it anywhere today. But the version that came from a stock pot behind a Sears lunch counter, ladled by a woman who had been stirring it since 6 in the morning, that version is gone. And nothing from a can or a carton will ever bring it back. Number 19. Deviled ham sandwich. Underwood deviled ham spread straight from the red can with the devil on the label, smeared on white bread, sometimes with a thin layer of yellow mustard, sometimes with nothing else at all. This was one of the cheapest sandwiches on the Woolworth's menu, and for a lot of people it was the first time they ever tasted deviled ham. The can cost pennies. The labor cost was 0. You opened the can, you spread it, you served it. No cooking, no heating, no skill required. And yet, it tasted like something. That salty, finely ground pork paste with its smoky pepper bite was oddly addictive. Kids loved it because it came from a can with a cartoon devil. Adults loved it because it was filling and it cost almost nothing. Woolworth's lunch counters moved through cases of Underwood deviled ham every week. The spread had been around since the 1860s, making it one of the oldest branded food products in the country. But the lunch counter sandwich was the version that put it in front of millions of people who never would have bought the can at a grocery store. The waitress would set it down on a small plate next to a handful of potato chips and a pickle spear, and that was lunch. No sides menu, no upsell, just a sandwich that cost a dime and tasted like it cost more. When Woolworth's disappeared, the deviled ham sandwich disappeared from public life along with it. You can still buy the can today at most grocery stores. The red devil is still on the label, and the recipe inside has barely changed. But nobody is spreading it on bread behind a lunch counter and sliding it across to you on a ceramic plate for pocket change. The deviled ham sandwich was never going to end up on a restaurant menu. It was too cheap, too simple, too plain for that. It needed a place like Woolworth's to exist in public, and when that place was gone, the sandwich went back into kitchens and packed lunches where no one could see it. Number 16. Egg salad on toast. Hard-boiled eggs chopped with a fork, mixed with mayonnaise and a pinch of celery salt, spread on toasted white bread with a leaf of iceberg lettuce. This was the default sandwich for anyone who wanted something plain and dependable. The eggs were boiled in the morning, and the salad was mixed by 10. It sat in a bowl behind the glass and went on to bread all day long without refrigeration, which is probably why health codes eventually helped retire it. The egg salad at a lunch counter was never cold. It was room temperature at best, slightly warm at worst, and somehow nobody seemed to mind. You could order it at Newberry's, McCrory's, Kresge, or any drugstore with a soda fountain, and it tasted exactly the same everywhere. The chalkboard behind the counter listed prices and names, but it never explained where these sandwiches came from. Most of them were immigrant food, recipes carried across the Atlantic and simplified for speed. German butchers brought the liverwurst and the Braunschweiger. Eastern European delis contributed the tongue and the rye bread. Southern cooks brought the pimento cheese. The lunch counter took all of it, stripped out the ceremony, and served it fast and cheap to anyone who sat down. For decades, this was how American food actually worked. Not restaurants, not cookbooks, not famous chefs. A flat-top grill, a loaf of bread, and whatever the neighborhood already knew how to eat. The lunch counter was the most democratic kitchen in the country, and nobody thought to write down what it served before it disappeared. Number 19. Cottage cheese on date nut bread. Slicing the bread out of a tin can was the strange small ritual at the start. Thomas's and B&M both sold dense, dark, sweet date nut loaves shaped exactly to the can, and the cook sliced thick and never toasted. Cottage cheese went on cold, a generous scoop of small curd, lightly salted, with one thin round of canned pineapple on top. The sandwich was strange and beautiful, like an afternoon dressed up just enough to feel like an event you had not earned but were grateful for. You could order it at Schraft's with a glass of iced tea, and the waitress would set it down on a paper doily. It was on every Schraft's menu for 20 years, and it disappeared the year Schraft's itself began to close stores. The date nut bread in a can went out of production at B&M in 1992. Women in their 80s still remember the exact taste, and there is no place left that will make it for them. Number 23. Creamed chipped beef on toast. Dried beef torn into strips, stirred into a thick white sauce made from butter, flour, and whole milk, then spooned over a piece of toast. Soldiers had a name for it that nobody repeated in polite company. Woolworth's just called it lunch. The sauce was heavy, salty, and filling, and it cost almost nothing to make, which is exactly why it showed up on dime store menus across the country. A plate of creamed chipped beef at Woolworth's came with a cup of coffee if the waitress liked you. The beef itself was paper thin, almost translucent, shaved from a pressed block that sat in the kitchen cooler. When Woolworth's faded creamed chipped beef on toast went with it. You can still buy the dried beef in a jar, but the lunch counter version, served hot and fast on a thick slice of white toast, is gone. Number 21. Ribbon sandwich. This was the lunch counter sandwich that tried to look elegant. 3 or 4 thin slices of crustless white and wheat bread stacked in alternating layers with different fillings between each one, pressed flat, chilled, and sliced crosswise so the layers showed like ribbons. The fillings were simple: cream cheese tinted pink with pimento on one layer, egg salad on the next, a thin spread of deviled ham on the third. The whole thing was held together by the cream cheese acting as glue. Lunch counters, tea rooms, and hotel coffee shops served ribbon sandwiches on oval plates with a sprig of parsley, and for decades they were the standard order for women's luncheons and bridal showers. Making them took time and steady hands, which is exactly why they vanished. When labor got expensive and lunch got fast, nobody had the patience to trim crusts and stack layers for a sandwich that sold for the same price as a ham on rye. A lunch counter was not a restaurant. It was a strip of formica bolted to the wall of a store that sold something else entirely. You ate with strangers on both sides of you, close enough to bump elbows, and the cook worked in full view so you could watch your food being made. There was no tipping culture to speak of, No waitstaff, no atmosphere, just speed, low prices, and a short menu that never changed. The sandwiches on that menu were not invented by chefs. They were invented by time pressure and tight margins. A countercook needed to make something good with 5 ingredients in 90 seconds. That constraint shaped every sandwich on this list, and when the constraint disappeared, so did the food. The chain restaurants moved in, the lunch counters locked their doors, and an entire category of American cooking simply stopped being made. Number 13, ham salad on white. Tuesday was ham salad day on Midwestern lunch counters from 1949 through about 1979. The cook ran Sunday's leftover ham through a hand grinder, watched it come out in a pink rope, and mixed it with mayonnaise, sweet pickle relish, a chopped hard-boiled egg, and a pinch of dry mustard. He spread it thick on white bread, cut it in half, and served it with potato chips and a dill spear. A Kresge's in Cleveland sold ham salad on white for 30 cents in 1958. A Woolworth's in Indianapolis charged 28 cents. A working family of 4 could stretch the same ham across an entire week, fresh on Sunday, sliced on Monday, ground into salad on Tuesday. The cook's grocery bill ran $1.50 for the week's protein. The dressing got tangier each day as the relish bled into the mayo, and Friday's sandwich tasted nothing like Tuesday's. By the 80s, the hand grinder went into the back of the cabinet. The cooks bought pre-made ham salad in plastic tubs, and the tubs went stale on the shelf. The Sunday leftover version is gone. Number 16, liver and onions. Sliced beef liver dusted in flour and pan-fried with a pile of yellow onions until both were soft and caramelized. Woolworths served it with mashed potatoes or boiled potatoes in a roll. This was old people food even in the 1950s. Younger customers walked past it. Older customers ordered it every week. The liver was thin cut, cooked fast in a hot skillet with butter, and the onions were piled on top until you could barely see the meat underneath. It was one of those dishes that divided the counter. Half the stools loved it, half the stools could smell it and wished they were sitting somewhere else. When Woolworths closed, liver and onions did not migrate to any other restaurant chain. It went home and stayed there, and even there, it is fading. The women behind the counter. Almost every Woolworths lunch counter in the country was run by women. They cooked, they served, they cleaned, and they did it for wages that barely covered bus fare. Most of them wore white uniforms and paper caps. Most of them knew the regulars by name and by order. They were not chefs, and they would have laughed if you called them that. They were working women who stood on their feet for 8 hours a day over a flat-top grill in a store that smelled like popcorn and floor wax. They kept the food moving, the coffee hot, and the counter clean, and they did it without complaint because complaining did not pay any better than cooking. When those women retired or moved on, nobody replaced them. The skill set did not transfer to fast food, and fast food did not want it. Number 13, olive nut sandwich. Green olives and pecans chopped fine, mixed with cream cheese, spread on white bread, and sliced into neat triangles. This was a tea room and lunch counter staple across the South and Midwest, and it showed up at every ladies' luncheon from the 1930s through the 1960s. The flavor was salty, tangy, and slightly sweet from the nuts, and the pale green color made it look like something from a garden party. Lunch counters kept the filling in a covered bowl and assembled them to order. Some added a thin layer of mayonnaise. Others used pimento stuffed olives for extra color. The sandwich was considered refined, which is the main reason it disappeared. When lunch counters gave way to fast food, nothing refined survived the transition. Number 12, Welsh rarebit, melted cheese poured over toast. That description does not begin to do it justice. A proper Welsh rarebit started with sharp cheddar melted slowly with butter, a splash of beer or Worcestershire sauce, a pinch of dry mustard, and sometimes an egg yolk to thicken it. The cook poured the hot cheese sauce over a slice of toast and served it open-faced, bubbling and golden. Lunch counters treated it as both a sandwich and a full meal, sometimes adding a slice of tomato or a strip of bacon underneath the cheese. It was filling, it was hot, and it required a fork. The name confused people then, and it confuses people now. There is no rabbit in it. when processed cheese slices arrived and microwaves took over, nobody wanted to stand over a double boiler melting cheddar for a sandwich. The rare bit needed a patient cook, and patience left the lunch counter long before the customers did. Number 17. Tongue on rye with mustard. The slice was 1/4 of an inch thick, fanned across the rye in 3 overlapping pieces, topped with a smear of horseradish and a single round of yellow mustard. Beef tongue was cheap at the wholesale market on 14th Street, simmered for 4 hours with onions and bay leaves, peeled while still warm, and sliced cold on the bias. A tongue sandwich was 35 cents at Katz's in 1956. The flavor was rich and beefy, the texture more tender than brisket ever reached. The sandwich held its place on Jewish deli counters and corner luncheonettes through the late 70s. And then beef prices dropped. The immigrant generation aged out. The kids stopped ordering it. Katz's still serves it. Almost nobody else does. Your grandfather knew the rail cook by his first name, and the rail cook knew which mustard he wanted before he sat down. Number 20. Welsh Rarebit. Cheddar cheese melted down with a splash of Worcestershire sauce, sometimes a little beer, poured hot over a thick piece of toast. Woolworths served it as a lunch special, usually with a pickle on the side. The name sounded fancy. The dish was anything but. It was melted cheese on bread with a kick, and it cost about as much as a grilled cheese but felt like twice the meal. Welsh Rarebit had been around for centuries, but the Woolworths version stripped it down to its simplest form. No ramekin, no broiler crust, just a ladle of cheese sauce over toast on a heavy ceramic plate. When the counters closed, Welsh Rarebit lost its last foothold in everyday American eating. Today it exists almost exclusively in British pubs and old cookbooks, and most people under 50 have never heard of it. Number 18. Limburger cheese sandwich. If you have never smelled Limburger, you either missed out or dodged a bullet, depending on who raised you. This was a soft, pungent cheese with a smell strong enough to announce itself from across the room, and lunch counters in German-American neighborhoods served it on dark rye with a thick slice of raw onion and brown mustard. The combination was not subtle and was never meant to be. Factory workers and railroad men ordered it because it was filling and cheap, and the smell kept other people from asking for a bite. By the 1970s, Limburger was harder to find, and the neighborhoods that favored it had changed. The sandwich hung on in a few taverns in Wisconsin and parts of the upper Midwest, but as a lunch counter item, it was finished. The people who loved it still talk about it. Everyone else just remembers the smell. Number 23. Olive nut on white toast. Stirring cream cheese soft with the back of a fork was how the recipe started. Chopped green olives with the pimento still in them, and toasted black walnuts, all folded until the mixture turned pale yellow, flecked with red and brown. Spread on white toast and cut diagonally. The sandwich showed up in every Better Homes and Gardens cookbook for 15 years and then quietly disappeared. Cream cheese moved on to bagels. Olives moved on to martinis. The black walnuts went the hardest because nobody was harvesting them anymore. The olive nut was simple and beautiful in an odd way, like a tea party leftover that the working world had borrowed for an hour. Now you can go a year of eating in restaurants and never once see one on a plate. Number 14. Cheese Dreams. An open-faced sandwich with a slice of American cheese on white bread, sometimes topped with a strip of bacon or a slice of tomato. Then run under the broiler until the cheese bubbled and browned at the edges. The name appeared in home economics cookbooks as far back as 1916, and by the Depression years it had become a staple recipe for families stretching a grocery budget. Woolworths put it on the menu because it cost almost nothing to make and it sounded better than what it was, which was fancy toast with melted cheese. But Cheese Dreams had a following. People ordered them by name. The cheese had to be American, the bread had to be white, and the edges had to be browned, not just melted. A perfectly made cheese dream had a crispy border where the cheese met the bread and a soft, gooey center that pulled when you tore it. Some locations added a dash of Worcestershire sauce to the cheese before broiling. The variation depended entirely on whoever was running the kitchen that day. The name is what made it last. Cheese Dreams. It sounded whimsical in a way that nothing else on the menu did, and kids would order it just to say the name out loud. When the last Woolworths counter shut down, cheese dreams stopped being something you could order in public. The recipe still shows up in vintage cookbooks and on nostalgia websites, but the name has lost its home. Nobody puts cheese dreams on a menu today because nobody knows what they are, and explaining it just makes it sound like grilled cheese with extra steps. Number 17. Meatloaf sandwich. A thick slab of cold meatloaf from the day before, sliced straight from the icebox and laid between two pieces of white bread with mustard and a leaf of iceberg lettuce. Lunch counters made meatloaf in sheet pans every morning, and whatever did not sell as a hot plate at dinner became sandwiches the next day. The bread went soft against the cold meat, and the mustard cut through the dense, beefy flavor just enough to keep the whole thing from feeling heavy. Some places served it warm, reheated on the flat grill with a slice of onion and a smear of ketchup. Others added a slice of American cheese and pressed it like a patty melt. The meatloaf sandwich was not glamorous, and nobody ever ordered it to impress anyone, but it was solid and filling, and you could eat it with one hand while reading the newspaper with the other. When lunch counters gave way to fast food chains, the meatloaf sandwich did not survive the transition. It was too plain, too slow, and too connected to the idea of yesterday's dinner to fit on a modern menu. Number 20. Underwood deviled ham on rye. Peeling back that red foil tin was the sound of a lunchbox opening from 1922 through about 1968. The tin held a paste of finely ground ham, mustard, vinegar, and spices that the William Underwood Company had been selling out of New England since 1868. You scooped 2 tablespoons onto rye, pressed a second slice on top, and cut diagonally. The tin had a small red devil on the label that had not changed in 50 years. It was the oldest registered trademark on a food product in the country. Mothers packed deviled ham sandwiches in metal pails for steel mill shifts and for school because the paste held up through a 6-hour day in any weather. But the kids called it pink mush by the 70s, and the doctors said the salt was too high. The deviled ham sandwich went to ground, and the small red devil on the tin became the only thing about it most Americans remembered. Number 21. Egg salad sandwich. Hard-boiled eggs mashed with mayonnaise, a little mustard, salt, pepper, and maybe some finely chopped celery if the cook felt generous, pressed between soft bread and cut in half. Woolworths made these by the dozens every morning, wrapped them in wax paper, and stacked them in a glass case at the counter. They were cold, they were plain, and they cost next to nothing. The egg salad sandwich was what you ordered when you had 15 cents and no opinion about lunch. Every Woolworths coast to coast had the same one, made the same way, tasting roughly the same whether you were in Portland or Tallahassee. That kind of national consistency from a lunch counter without a franchise playbook is something that does not exist anymore. Number 19. Braunschweiger sandwich. Braunschweiger was a smoked liverwurst, softer and richer than the regular kind, and it spread like butter across a slice of pumpernickel. Lunch counters in the Midwest served it thick, with a slice of raw onion and a squirt of yellow mustard, and it was one of those sandwiches you either grew up eating or could not understand at all. The name came from Braunschweig, a city in Germany, and the sausage itself was part of the massive wave of German food traditions that shaped American eating from the 1850s forward. Along with frankfurters, sauerkraut, and rye bread, Braunschweiger became a grocery store staple. By mid-century, Oscar Mayer, Usinger's in Milwaukee, and dozens of small regional packers all made their own version, each one slightly different in smoke level and spice. The lunch counter version was simple. The cook sliced it from a chub, fanned it across the bread, and slid the plate down the counter without ceremony. What made it memorable was the flavor. Rich, smoky, and faintly mineral with a paste-like texture that stuck to the roof of your mouth. Some people added lettuce and tomato, which did absolutely nothing to soften the intensity. Others paired it with sharp cheddar and a few cornichons on the side. There was a time when this sandwich showed up at every five and dime from Davenport to Duluth. The counter cook kept a fresh chub wrapped in wax paper next to the mustard jar, and it went through a full chub every day or two. Kids ate it because their fathers ate it. Fathers ate it because their fathers brought the taste from the old country. When lunch counters closed and supermarket delis started pushing turkey and roast beef, Braunschweiger retreated to the back of the cold case. You can still find it in parts of Wisconsin and Minnesota, but the sandwich as a lunch counter standard is gone. One generation grew up on it, and the next one grew up pretending it never existed. Number 22. Welsh rarebit on toast. The sauce was the whole sandwich. Sharp cheddar melted with milk, beer, dry mustard, and a few drops of Worcestershire, poured thick over a slab of toasted white loaf and slid under the broiler until the top went gold. You could eat it with a fork. The lunch rail kept a small saucepan of it warm and stirred. A trucker could order Welsh rarebit, eat it like a hot lunch with coffee, and be on the road by 1:15. The sandwich required a real sauce, and the sauce required someone behind the rail who could pay attention. As the counters moved to faster food, Welsh rarebit was the earliest item to vanish from the slate. Nobody was asking for it anyway. Number 24. Lime Jello salad. A square of bright green gelatin loaded with shredded carrots, crushed pineapple, and sometimes cottage cheese, served on a leaf of iceberg lettuce with a dollop of mayonnaise on top. Woolworth's lunch counters kept these pre-made in individual glass dishes behind the counter, lined up on a refrigerated shelf where you could point at the one you wanted. It counted as a salad. It counted as a side. Some people ordered it as dessert. Nobody questioned it. The green wobble was part of the scenery at every five and dime counter in the country, and when those counters shut down, the Jell-O salad lost its last public stage. You can still find the recipe in old church cookbooks, but nobody is serving it over a lunch counter anymore. Before I go any further, for the folks who want more of these kinds of recipes all gathered in one place, I put together the Vintage Recipe Guide. You can find it on my website, vintagelifestyleusa.com. That is the only time I will mention it. If it sounds like something you need, it is right there. Now, back to the list. Number 20. Sardine sandwich. A tin of sardines mashed flat on dark rye bread with a squeeze of lemon, a few rings of raw onion, and a smear of mustard. This was a working sandwich, the kind ordered by men who came in from the loading dock with 15 minutes and no patience for anything complicated. Lunch counters in port cities and industrial neighborhoods kept sardine tins stacked behind the counter because they were cheap, they lasted forever, and the sandwich took 30 seconds to assemble. The fish was salty and soft, and the rye bread kept it from falling apart. Some places served it open-faced with a slice of tomato. Others pressed the bread down tight and cut it on the diagonal. It never pretended to be elegant, and nobody ordered it on a date. The sardine sandwich started disappearing from American lunch counter menus in the 1960s, pushed aside by tuna salad, which was milder and did not divide the room with its smell. The tin is still on the grocery shelf, but the sandwich itself belongs to a counter and a crowd that no longer exist. Number 21. Banana mayonnaise on white. The first bite tasted wrong and right in the same instant. Sweet banana, salty mayonnaise, soft white bread. The mayonnaise was Duke's. The bananas were green-tipped, sliced thin, laid in a single overlapping layer. A sprinkle of salted peanuts on top when the jar held some. The sandwich was a Southern staple long before the Depression, like so many of the things this country eats without questioning. The bread was buttered on the outside on hot days to keep the slices from going slimy. The lunch counters that served it widely are gone now. The sandwich is still eaten in pockets across the Deep South. Most never try it. They are missing something honest. Number 22. Date nut bread with cream cheese. Every lunch counter had a loaf of dark, dense date nut bread sitting under a glass dome near the register. The cook sliced it thin, spread both sides with cream cheese, and served it on a small plate with no garnish. It was sweet, earthy, and filling. The bread itself was studded with chopped walnuts and sticky pieces of date, and it held together like a brick. Some counters bought the canned version from Dromedary, which came in a tall, cylindrical tin you opened from both ends and pushed the loaf out like a log. Nobody under 60 remembers this sandwich today. The canned bread disappeared from most grocery shelves by the 1980s, and the lunch counter version vanished even earlier. Number 15. Sloppy Joe Manhattan style. The Sloppy Joe you remember from a school cafeteria tray was not the original. The original was a triple-decker deli sandwich invented at the Town Hall Deli in South Orange, New Jersey, in the early 1930s and adopted by Manhattan lunch counters by 1948. 3 slices of seeded rye, 2 layers of thinly sliced corned beef and Swiss, a layer of coleslaw, and a coat of Russian dressing between the layers. The whole sandwich was cut into quarters and pinned with toothpicks like a small flag held the thing together. You could eat one in 5 minutes and walk back to the office full. The deli claimed the recipe came home from a politician's vacation in Havana, where the bartender at a place called Sloppy Joe's served something similar with rum on the side. The story is more legend than history at this point, but the deli still tells it on the wall. The loose meat ground beef version came later out of Sioux City, Iowa, and took over the name by the late 40s. Articles about the cafeteria tray version were everywhere by 1957. One thing I noticed reading old menus is that the Manhattan version was always called Sloppy Joe with a capital, never Sloppy Joe lowercase, as if the name was a proper restaurant title. Most Americans today have no idea there were 2 completely different sandwiches called the same thing. The Manhattan one was better. Number 17. Salisbury steak plate. A ground beef patty shaped into an oval, pan-fried and covered in thick mushroom gravy, served with mashed potatoes and usually a side of canned green beans. Woolworth's Salisbury steak was not a hamburger. The patty had breadcrumbs and egg mixed into the meat, which made it softer and stretched it further. 1 pound of ground beef could produce 3 or 4 patties this way, and the gravy covered up the fact that the meat was more filler than steak. The name came from a doctor in the 1880s who promoted ground beef patties as a health food. By the time Woolworths put it on the menu, nobody remembered the doctor. They just knew it was cheap, hot, and filling, and it came with enough gravy to make everything on the plate taste the same. Number 14. Soft-shell crab sandwich. A whole soft-shell crab, lightly dredged in seasoned flour and fried fast in hot oil until the legs went crisp, pressed between 2 halves of a roll with a leaf of lettuce and a squeeze of tartar sauce. This was a seasonal lunch counter sandwich, and in the spring and early summer, counters along the Chesapeake Bay, the Jersey Shore, and the Gulf Coast put them on the board the same week the watermen brought in the first molting crabs. The crab was small enough to fit in one hand, and when it was fried right, the shell crackled like a potato chip and the meat inside stayed sweet and tender. You ate the whole thing, legs and all. That was the point. No picking, no cracking, no tools. A lunch counter cook could fry a dozen in the time it took to shuck 1 bushel of hard shells, and the sandwich moved fast during the lunch rush. The soft shell season was short, sometimes only 6 or 8 weeks, and the price stayed low because the crabs were local and abundant. Watermen in Maryland and Virginia sold them by the basket at the dock, and a lunch counter near the water could put a fried crab sandwich on the menu for pocket change. Some cooks added Old Bay to the flour. Others kept it plain and let the crab speak for itself. Either way, the sandwich was gone from the board by July, and you waited a full year for the next one. What killed the lunch counter version was not the taste, but the economics. By the late 1970s, soft-shell crabs were being shipped to white tablecloth restaurants in New York and Chicago, where chefs served them on brioche with aioli and microgreens. The price followed the demand. A crab that once cost a lunch counter a few cents now fetched several dollars wholesale, and no counter could absorb that and still sell a sandwich for a working lunch price. The soft-shell crab moved upmarket, and the rough, fast, paper plate version eaten standing at a waterfront counter vanished with the men who used to order it. Number 18. Watercress with butter. Trimming the crusts with a wet knife was how the small ceremony started. The bread was crustless white, paper thin, spread with sweet butter from end to end. Watercress went on rinsed and picked over, laid in a dense green carpet that almost glowed against the white. A second slice pressed on top, the sandwich cut into 4 neat triangles on a paper doily. A department store clerk on her lunch break, a teacher on a 40-minute window, a Saturday shopper into the city. All of them could order one and feel the day had been a small occasion. The watercress trade was supplied by a handful of farms, and as those farms shrank, the sandwich shrank with them. The tea sandwich tradition is mostly gone now, and watercress with butter went with it. Number 22. Cottage cheese and peach plate. A scoop of cottage cheese in the center of a plate, surrounded by canned peach halves, sometimes with a maraschino cherry dropped in the middle. This was the diet plate. Every woman watching her figure in the 1950s and 1960s ordered this, and every Woolworths had it on the menu. No cooking involved. The peaches came out of a commercial-sized can, the cottage cheese out of a 5-pound tub, and the whole thing was plated in under a minute. It looked like health food before health food existed. The combination of sweet canned fruit and cold, lumpy cottage cheese was considered a sensible choice at the time, and ordering it at the counter meant you were being practical. That entire idea vanished with the counter itself. Number 15. Fried bologna sandwich. A thick slice of bologna scored with a knife so it would not curl, fried on the flat top until the edges crisped and the center puffed, slapped onto white bread with mustard and a slice of American cheese. This was not a delicate sandwich. It was loud, greasy, and satisfying in a way that embarrassed people who thought they had moved past it. Lunch counters served it because bologna was one of the cheapest meats available, and frying it made it taste like something worth ordering. The sizzle on the grill was part of the sales pitch. You heard it before you saw it, and by the time the cook slid it across the counter, the bread was already going translucent from the grease. Some diners in Appalachia and the rural South still fry bologna, but the lunch counter version, served on a paper plate with a bag of chips, is gone. Number 24. Leverwurst on rye with raw onion. The smell hit you before you saw the plate, like wet leather and pepper, and the bite of raw onion came right behind. Boar's Head sliced the loaf thick at every Liggett's drugstore in Brooklyn through the 50s. The counterman layered it on seeded rye with a sharp ring of yellow onion, a smear of brown mustard, and a single dill spear set off to the side. The sandwich was loud. The onion bit. The mustard cut through. The liverwurst itself was soft, a dusky pink paste of pork liver and fat that the immigrant butchers in Yorkville had been making for 30 years before it ever reached the rail. You could eat one standing up in 4 minutes and walk back to the shop full of it. But the kids would not eat organ meats anymore by 1975. The doctors were warning about cholesterol. By 2024, Boar's Head stopped making liverwurst entirely. There was a generation of countercooks who could trim a liverwurst loaf in their sleep, and there is no one left now to teach the next one how. Number 18. Hot open-faced turkey sandwich. A slice of white bread laid flat on a plate, covered with sliced turkey, then smothered in brown gravy. Mashed potatoes on the side, sometimes with a scoop of cranberry sauce. This was the Thanksgiving plate you could get any Tuesday in January, and Woolworths served it as a daily special in most locations. The turkey was roasted in-house in some stores and came from a commercial supplier in others, but the gravy was always made from drippings and flour, thick enough to hold its shape on the bread. You ate it with a knife and fork. Nobody picked this up. The gravy made sure of that. It was a full hot dinner for the price of a sandwich, and people who ate alone at the counter ordered it more than almost anything else. That open-faced turkey plate was comfort on a 10-inch ceramic dish. Number 10. St. Paul sandwich. An egg foo young patty on white bread with mayonnaise, lettuce, tomato, and dill pickle. If that sounds like two different cuisines crashed into each other, that is exactly what happened. The St. Paul sandwich was born in the Chinese-American restaurants and lunch counters of St. Louis, and nobody has ever fully explained why it exists. The egg foo young was fried, crispy, flat, and golden like a thick pancake filled with bean sprouts and whatever protein the cook had on hand, and it was dressed like a plain American sandwich. The result was something that did not belong to any single tradition and belonged completely to St. Louis. A few restaurants in the city still serve it today, but the lunch counter where you could get one for loose change is long gone. Number 9. Denver sandwich. You might know this one by another name if you grew up west of the Mississippi, the Western sandwich. It was an omelet made with diced ham, onion, and green bell pepper, folded and pressed between two slices of toast. Lunch counters served it all day long because the ingredients were cheap and the cook could make it in 3 minutes on the flat top. The egg mixture hit the grill, the fillings went in, the cook folded it over and slid it between the bread before the egg fully set. The result was half sandwich and half breakfast, which made it popular with shift workers who ate lunch at odd hours. The Denver sandwich still exists in some diners, but the lunch counter version, made on a flat top right in front of you without a menu description needed, is a thing of the past. Number 14, SOS, chipped beef gravy over toast. Soldiers had 3 letters for it, and your grandfather knew all 3. The polite version was, "Save our souls." Every American diner counter ran it on the breakfast menu from 1948 through about 1972. Dried beef, rinsed of salt, simmered in a quick milk and butter gravy that the rail thickened with a pinch of flour, then ladled hot over a stack of buttered white toast. Veterans of the Second World War had eaten the same dish thrice weekly in mess halls overseas, and when they came home, they wanted it on a plate around dawn before the morning shift kicked off. It was 40 cents at a Pittsburgh diner in 1955. The coffee was a dime. The plate came hot, the gravy thick, the beef salty and chewy in a way that woke a man up like a slap on the cheek. A trucker could finish 2 plates and a black coffee in 15 minutes flat and be on the road before sunrise. The dish disappeared as the diners themselves disappeared, as the McDonald's drive-thrus took over the breakfast trade. Your grandfather could still make a perfect one at home. Most cooks under 50 have never heard the name. Number 15, tomato soup and crackers. A bowl of tomato soup, usually from a can, heated up and ladled into a heavy white bowl with a sleeve of saltine crackers on the side. Woolworths did not make the soup from scratch. They opened a can, added water, heated it on the stove, and served it. And it sold every single day. Tomato soup at the Woolworths counter was not about the soup. It was about the seat, the warmth, the 10 minutes of sitting down in the middle of a shopping trip with something hot in front of you. The crackers were always saltines, always in the cellophane sleeve, always 2 packs per bowl. You crumbled them in or you ate them on the side, and either way, you were done in under 10 minutes and back on your feet. For the price of that bowl, you bought yourself a rest. Not one of those counters survived. They disappeared store by store, and most were gone before anyone thought to take a photograph. 25 specials from a place that asked for nothing but an empty stool and a few minutes of your afternoon. Someone cooked every one of these from scratch, and someone ate every one of them without knowing it would be the last time. If any of these brought something back for you, leave it in the comments. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is a good time because I will be back with another one soon. I will see you in the next one.